Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And as always, I want to start by thanking the people that sent me a lot of these, and it's always appreciated. That would be Chris Fallon, Jason Dance, Baird Peterson, and Ali bin Wadil. Guys, thank you so very much. Let's get started down under with Deakin University. They suffered a data breach that affected nearly 47,000 current and past students, with the attacker carrying out a smishing attempt as well, and that is according to university's public statement. Smishing, obviously, SMS text phishing, all that kind of stuff. Now, the university became aware of this incident on Sunday, July 10th, in which its staff members' usernames and password was hacked by an unauthorized person that basically that had access to information that was held by a third-party provider. On its website, Deakin, interestingly enough, university advertises its cybersecurity courses as thus: quote, study at Deakin and gain the skills to understand cyber issues and the ways to identify, diagnose, and resolve these challenges. Seems like Deakin themselves needs to take a lesson from their own page. Moving on, let's talk about Colorado Springs Utilities in scenic Colorado. They are warning customers about a data breach that happened in June affecting customer information. Now, on July 6th, Colorado Springs Utilities was notified that customer data stored by one of its company's subcontractors was accessed by an unauthorized third party. According to the Springs Utilities, this happened on June 15th of this year. We're talking names, addresses, account numbers, and in most cases, phone numbers and email addresses. However, Colorado Springs Utilities said no sensitive financial data or Social Security numbers as well were actually compromised. So we'll see what that third party is, but heads up if you are a resident of Colorado Springs and use the utilities by the same name. Moving on. Let's talk about VCU Health out of Virginia. They revealed to patients that basically their system had a massive breach. Now, this issue has since been resolved, but this exposed medical records of nearly 4,500 organ donors and transplant recipients over 16 years. In total, 4,441 patients were potentially impacted. VCU's health investigation determined that this information was accessible basically from as early as January 4 of 2006, meaning the data set goes all the way back to the beginning of 2006. We're talking names, social security numbers, medical records, lab results, and more. So if you use VC Health for all of your organ donor or transplant needs, you definitely want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about the Texas-based Tenet Healthcare and its affiliate Baptist Health System. This is actually an update because they're now facing basically a healthcare data breach lawsuit related to the cybersecurity incident that they had earlier in April of this year that affected approximately 1.2 million patients. I went back in my notes. I actually did cover this back in the day. Now, the plaintiff, Troy Contreras, filed the lawsuit in Dallas County on July 5th and is seeking class action status and more than $1 million in damages. As previously reported, Texas-based Tenet Healthcare's basically informed the world that they discovered a data breach on April 20th of this year. And so if you are a patient at Texas-based Tenet Healthcare affiliates or Baptist Medical Center and Resolute Health Hospital, you may be entitled to compensation. Go talk to Mr. Contreras. Moving on, let's stay in Texas and talk about the Christus Spawn Health System because they're notifying patients of a May data breach that compromised the protected health information of about 15,000 patients. This hit the news on July 11th with local affiliates. Now, on May 4th, the health system's IT security learned that an unauthorized user had accessed the system, which contained protected health information, including patients' full names, social security, date of birth, home address, billing and insurance information. This data breach did not affect health system operations, meaning the hospital did not have to shut down. But if you're a patient at the Christus Spawn Health System, you definitely want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about Afni Inc. They basically had a data breach as well on or before June 7th of last year. An unauthorized party was able to gain access to the company's computer systems and may have viewed or removed certain data. Now, according to Afni, the breach resulted in names, addresses, social security numbers, and dates of birth being compromised. We don't know how many were impacted yet, but if you're an employee of Afni, and from what I understand, they have about 9,000 employees spread over multiple states here in the United States, you definitely want to check in with your employer or if you're a customer. Moving on. Let's talk about Health Aid of Ohio. This is also an update because they just agreed to settle a class action lawsuit to resolve claims that they failed to protect sensitive personal information from their February 19th, 2021 data breach that impacted 141,149 individuals. So if you have anything to do with Health Aid of Ohio, you may be entitled to compensation. Moving on. Let's talk about Professional Finance Company, or PFC. Now, I did these guys, I want to say a week or two ago. This is a massive medical supply chain breach that just recently happened, and this is an update on that. And we are obviously going to see hospitals and health systems that were using and outsourcing essentially a lot of their medical billing or collections to PFC now coming to fruition. This week, it's Bay Health Medical Center for more than 17,000 of their patients. So if you use Bay Health Med, definitely check in. Moving on, let's talk about the British recruitment agency Morgan Hunt, and I quote directly, Morgan Hunt recently experienced a cybersecurity incident in which one of our databases was impacted by an unauthorized third party gained access to our systems. Unfortunately, our investigations have shown that some of your personal data was contained on the Access database that may have been copied. Now, the information, according to them, that was on this database included contractors' names, contact details, identity documents, proof of address documents, including any bank or building society statement provided, national insurance numbers, and dates of birth. So heads up, if you use Morgan Hunt out of Britain for all of your recruitment needs, they might have gotten you compromised. Moving on, we're going to talk about a massive phishing campaign that essentially is involving Microsoft, and here's what we're talking about, because Microsoft researchers have uncovered a massive phishing campaign that can steal credentials even if a user has multi-factor authentication enabled. And so far, basically, this criminal group or whatever has attempted to compromise more than 10,000 organizations out there. Now, the campaign, which has been active since September of last year, depends on the use of what is known as an adversary in the middle, or AITM, phishing website that initially basically attacks you to hijack session cookies from your web browser and then steal your credentials. From there, they can access, the victim's user's mailbox to launch further attacks against other targets. And that, again, is according to Microsoft's research into this potential threat. So understand that while you might have multi-factor authentication, we are really moving towards different types of multi-factor authentication, including adaptive and contextual multi-factor authentication as it relates to things like identity management providers out there. And so it's not just having MFA anymore. It's making sure that you have things like identity management providers that now are seeing this traffic, or even geo-blocking, meaning I'm sitting here in Chicago, Illinois, and if suddenly I'm, in Los Angeles trying to log in, the system will simply block it because, well, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. That's what we're talking about. Obviously a huge problem. That said, you still need MFA. All of the basic attacks, it will help thwart very well. On top of that, let's talk about 1.6 million WordPress sites and our vulnerabilities here today, because security researchers have detected a massive campaign that scanned close to 1.6 million WordPress sites for the presence of a vulnerable plugin that would allow the uploading and downloading of files without authentication. Now, if you have a website built on WordPress, these attackers are specifically targeting the Kaswara Modern WP Bakery page builder. I'll say that again, Kaswara Modern WP Bakery page builder. Now, the vulnerability in this plugin would allow an unauthenticated attacker to inject malicious JavaScript into sites using any version of this plugin, and performs actions like uploading and deleting files, which could obviously lead to a complete takeover of the site. So if you have a website using WordPress, 1, I'd get rid of that plugin. 2, I would make sure that you are constantly up to date. And 3, we need to make sure that you have a WAF, or web application firewall, in front of your website. So what's going to happen with a WAF is, as soon as it starts to sense traffic that is malicious or outside of the realm of me just going to your site to look for information, it will start shutting those down and blocking those. When we run everything from vulnerability scans to penetration testing against those sites, those that are running web application firewalls tend to stop and block the IP address that we're coming from, which is exactly what you want to see. So if you've got WordPress, keep it up to date. Use only good plugins that are really known and really popular. Don't leave the old ones hanging out there, and get yourself a web application firewall. And finally, we have to talk Interestingly enough, about the CIA Vault 7 data breach back in 2017, because a really interesting update has come to light. If you recall, that was a massive, massive black eye for one of the largest intelligence agencies in the world. Here's what's going on now. A computer program who helped the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, design some of its most sensitive and secretive hacking tools was convicted this past Wednesday of handing over troves of internal CIA documents to WikiLeaks for that infamous Vault 7 leak, which prosecutors called, and I quote, one of the most brazen and damaging acts of espionage in American history. Now, jurors in a Manhattan federal court convicted 33-year-old Joshua Schulte on 9 counts, including illegal gathering of national defense information and illegal transmission of unlawfully possessed documents. Nicholas Baez, a spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, confirmed all of this information. Prosecutors have argued Schulte leaked the documents to WikiLeaks in 2017 because he held a grudge against the CIA for failing to take his workplace complaints seriously. Schulte, who interestingly enough represented himself at trial, reportedly argued that there wasn't enough evidence to prove that he was the one that leaked the documents, and claimed that the CIA was seeking to frame him for the incident, even though other staffers had access to the same information that he did. Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, wrote in the statement, and I quote, "When Schulte began to harbor resentment towards the CIA, he covertly collected those tools and provided them to WikiLeaks, making some of our most critical intelligence tools known to the public and therefore our adversaries. Today, Schulte has been convicted for one of the most brazen and damaging acts of espionage in American history." Now, interestingly enough as well, Schulte was previously put on trial 2 years ago, but the judge declared a mistrial after the jurors couldn't reach a verdict on most of the charges, meaning the first jury or the first round of trial, at least half the juror or some of the jury thought, yeah, he's probably being framed. Now, up until 2016, Schulte worked for basically an elite internal CIA team whose job it was to make programs that could break into the phones and computers of U.S. adversaries. But according to a June New Yorker article, Schulte grew frustrated with the CIA due to various disputes with his colleagues, who reportedly conducted their spy movie-esque work in an environment that was comparable to a fraternity, obviously complete with pranks and all that kind of stuff, Nerf gun fights, insulting nicknames, etc., etc. He apparently was not a fan. By 2017, tons of information on these secretive tools designed by Schulte's team appeared on WikiLeaks, run by Julian Assange, who I believe is now extradited or is in the process of being extradited to the United States for his trial. That's obviously a very embarrassing moment for the CIA, and rendered a lot of these super secret tools essentially useless, according to the prosecution. Now, on top of this mess, Schulte will now also face a separate child pornography trial after agents said they discovered evidence during a search of his computer. He has pled not guilty, obviously claiming, well, if they're going to frame me for that, they might as well stick some, deeply illegal pornography on my computer. I'm going to just guess that's his defense. So those were your breaches of the week. Just another crazy week, although a little short on breaches this time. I'm not at 30 minutes as I'm sitting here talking to you. I'm in 13 minutes in, which is pretty good. The less breaches, the better, but obviously still damaging. If you were affected by any of these, definitely make sure you're contacting them. Definitely make sure you're taking steps to protect yourself and your privacy. And those were your breaches of the week. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everyone.